Our bodies are with us all the time. And whether or not we acknowledge that or not, our bodies are responding to things. If you continuously ask yourself the following question and you say, am I getting something positive from this? And as soon as the answer is no, putting it away. So I think about it as, how will I be able to show up at my best and be the most sustainable versus how can I produce a lot in a little bit of time? You have to decide that you're worth it, that you're important, and that you're willing to work for it.
This is the Energy Within podcast, all about accessing, nurturing, and building your energy and confidence so that you can design your life the way you want. My name is Kerri Jokala. I am a Reiki Master, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this episode is with Morgan Risden, who is an Alexander Technique teacher. And if you don't know what the Alexander Technique is, obviously we're going to dive into that today, but it can help you with so many things, starting with physical habits, all the way to your emotional habits, the things that you think, the way that you talk to yourself, the way you think about yourself. We touch a lot. We spend a lot of time on the physical side. And as we got towards the end, we started to get into a little bit more of the emotional side, how confidence ties in, and decided that there's going to need to be a part 2. So stay tuned for that. But there's so much that I know you're going to get out of this particular episode, starting with the physical, being aware of your habits, being aware of and being kind to your body. I don't know if it's necessary for me to mention this, but I'm going to throw it in right now. If my voice sounds a little scratchy right now and throughout the interview, I had an allergy attack a few days ago prior to recording this episode, and it's kind of morphed into not really a cold, but like it's still hanging out in my lungs a little bit, obviously my throat. So hopefully my voice isn't too distracting. Morgan is, of course, the star of this episode, so you'll hear more from her than you do from me, but that's just my explanation for why I sound the way that I do right now. So I'm really excited for you to hear this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you enjoy this, please share it to your social media. Tag me, tag Morgan. Let us know what you like. Let us know what stuck out to you. Let us know what you have questions on. I'm excited for you to hear this one, so here we go. Morgan, I am so excited that we were finally able to connect and have you come be a guest on the podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I would love for you to start off and just explain who you are and what you do.
So my name is Morgan Risden, and I'm a nationally certified Alexander Technique teacher. So for those people who don't know what that is, I teach people to pay attention to the habits that they have and look at what habits they have that are causing excess tension, stress, strain, and looking at ways that they can eliminate those patterns of compression or tightness, and so that they can be more relaxed, more easy, and calm in their bodies. So that can be both, dealing with anxiety, or that could also be looking at patterns of tightness that contribute to back pain. And for anybody who's maybe overwhelmed or feels excess stress, it can also help them find more relaxation and calm.
So it sounds like it encompasses kind of everything almost.
Well, we have habits, right?
Right.
In everything we do. So if you think about habits by the way that you sit, stand, walk, how you have a conversation with your husband, right? Your reactions to certain people when they say things to you, patterns that you have when you think about something. If you have a certain topic that brings up certain emotions, there could be habits in those thoughts that you have. Those things contain patterns of stress and strain that we're not always aware of. So when people become more aware of their habits, and those habits can be anything, then they have more options about, do I want to do this anymore? Mm-hmm. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you're somebody who's had an injury, and it was an injury that caused you to have a cast on your leg, or maybe you had a wrap around your hand, or something like that, that you had to have for a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, right? You might develop habits with regard to how you use the rest of your body to accommodate that injury that you had. And now let's say weeks and months pass, you take those, casts off or what have you, and now you're still dealing with it as though it's still there. Mm-hmm. And if you're not aware that you're doing that, you can't really stop it. So we look as Alexander Technique teachers at all the habits that you have and find out, where are you making things harder and more difficult for you in everyday life, and how can we make things easier? So typically when a student comes to an Alexander teacher, we'll look at things like sitting, standing, walking, and we'll say, oh, do you think that you need to put your hands on this chair in order to hoist yourself up? And they say, oh, let's look at that. No, I don't. When I don't, I actually feel like it's easier to get up. Yes. Okay. So we help guide students through noticing how they can move more efficiently and how they can access this place of ease and natural alignment. And that, of course, seeps into habits that we have about thinking. Do we have habits that are very stressful, overwhelming, and anxious? Or are we pretty relaxed? Do we take life a little bit calmer? Do we not stress out immediately? Staying more present in the present moment? So it can really vary on the spectrum.
You made me think, real brief tangent. My youngest son, when you said, do you need to put your hands on the chair to hoist yourself up? This kid, he is like the strongest little dude I've ever met in my life. And he can stand up from like practically laying down without using his hands. He just like, whoop, just straight up. Yes. I'm like, how are you doing that?
Yeah.
And it's making me, I'm like, okay, I know I'm bigger. I have further to go, more weight to push up, but I want to do that.
You can do that. You can do that. Kerri, you can do that. So I'm always, because I'm always telling my students, children and animals are great examples of good alignment. Yeah. So they have like this natural ease about themselves that most of us lose as we get older, right? And I think, personally speaking, I don't know if all Alexander teachers would agree, but personally speaking, I think it starts at a very young age because we're forced to sit. Mm-hmm. We're forced to sit and pay attention in school. We're told when to go to the bathroom, when to eat. So we're not necessarily taught how to listen to our bodies, right? How to listen to, am I actually hungry at 11:45? I was actually hungry a little earlier, or I'm not hungry at all till 12, right? So I feel like that sort of ability for us to listen to ourselves is sort of muted. It's put aside by, the institutes in which we navigate our lives, right? Work, school, etc. And I think that children, before they enter the school system, they tend to have better patterns of what we call use. Yeah. That's the way somebody uses themselves, because they're aligning in a way that's really easy and free. They don't scrunch their neck to go reach for something. You'll never see a little kid decide to reach up at the top of the pantry to get something. They'll just take the time to make a little wobbly step ladder of like precariously put things, and they somehow get to the box of candy. It's like, but they took twice as long to do that. Whereas adults will be like, I'm going to strain my neck to get to the back of the whatever, versus, I could get a step stool to get there.
It's funny you mentioned that about the body cues and the kids listening to that, because my oldest son, he just turned 4 a couple months ago, so he's going to be starting 4K. And I can't believe you said that, because I was suddenly thinking, I'd never really thought about this before. I was suddenly thinking, like, what if he's hungry before lunchtime? Like, because he knows to tell me when, he just tells me when he's hungry, and we go get a snack or whatever it is that, whatever time of day it is. Like, what if he's hungry before lunch? Like, are they going to let him have a snack?
It's interesting. Different schools work differently, but personally speaking, my 7-year-old's going into 2nd grade, and she already has like a tendency to kind of compress down and like slump, we call it slumping. Mm-hmm. But whereas my 4-year-old, right, she's a lot more upright, and she's kind of more teeter-totter, and, she has what we call good posture. And so for me as a teacher, I'm always giving the example of watching children to my students, because if you look at them, they move more easily than we do. So they would never go down on the floor and keep their legs straight and bend at their imaginary waist. They would always use their ankles, knees, and hips. They would always squat, right? And we sort of make fun of that as like, oh, if your back is really hurt, then you squat. But it's actually, no, it's more ergonomic to, that's keeping with the integrity of your spine and not compressing yourself. And I think that people forget that those ankle, knees and hips are the weight bearing joints that you're supposed to fold on. And so when we repetitively use other parts of our body, our hips, or using our shoulders to do something that we could instead hinge at our hips, to get and move our arms, we abuse those muscles of the back, the muscles of the shoulder. And then we end up compromising ourselves and getting ourselves with neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain,
right. So if we've been neglecting listening to our bodies, and in my mind starts going all these different directions, like so many different levels of that we could talk about, not listening to our bodies. But if we just start on the physical plane and how we've learned to ignore our body cues, and then things compound, and then it creates pain, which could turn into chronic pain and things like that then need to be treated down the road. How do we, I guess, turn that around? Like, what's the first step to getting back in touch with what our bodies are trying to say to us?
That's a great question, because so the Alexander Technique has different principles. And the first one that we usually look at is awareness. That's self-awareness.
Sure.
And so, for example, I was talking to my father who was watching my children the other day, and he was talking about playing a game with them on the floor. And I didn't even let him finish, because I was like, why the heck were you on the floor? Like, you're 70. I'm like, that's the difference between you and I. Besides age, I would never, ever, ever get on the floor with my kids to do a game that's that long. I would be like, you want to do a game? Come up to the kitchen table, come up to the coffee table. Even I could be on the floor, but I'm at the coffee table, versus being on the complete floor.
That's interesting because I don't mean to cut you off, but that's interesting because when I was doing more personal training, a lot of my older clients or, people who would come in for the assessments just to do the trials would be like, one of their goals is to be able to get on the floor to play with their grandkids. So that's interesting that you point that out.
But you could be on the floor to play with your grandkids, but are you hunched down towards the floor with a puzzle? You see what I'm saying? Because if your kid is old enough to play a game or do a puzzle, they're at the height where they could be standing at the coffee table and you could be sitting at the coffee table. But there's no reason for a grown person to be hunched, you wouldn't be like, let's color little kiddo on the floor. It's like, if that little baby, if it's a baby, that's a different conversation. But even so, then you could lie completely on the floor and play games with the baby rolling around. You wouldn't have to actually, my children are 4 and 7. They're old enough to be at a table, right? So it's just, to me, it's about being able to recognize in the moment, what do I need? And what do I want to do? Oh, I want to play a game with my kids. Well, how best am I going to do that? So in Alexander Technique, I'm telling students, it's the how you do something and then the what, not the what and how do I do it? It's how am I going to do it? Right. So if somebody said to me, for example, have a seat, Morgan, I would look around and think to myself, how am I best going to have that seat?
Okay.
Because if I don't stop to think about it, chances are I will fall into a habit that most likely, not all the time, but most likely has some patterns of excess tension and strain that I don't need. Right. So for example, a student today came in and I was teaching outside and it got hot. Right. So she needed to find a hair tie in her purse. So she's tall. This woman's maybe 6'1", 6'2". So she walks over to her purse and it's down in a lower chair. And so she starts digging there. And then I said, well, why don't you pick up the purse and put it on the massage table? Oh, yeah, that's great. Because now it's higher. But in that moment, probably one is thinking, how is it best for me to get from A to B and be as fast as possible? This woman, she might be thinking, oh, it's waiting for me. I don't want to take a lot of time to find my hair tie. And in my world, I'm always encouraging people, take as much time as you need so that you can better care for yourself, so that then you can better show up for everybody else. So it's kind of like that analogy, put your air mask on, right, before your others. So it's thinking about every single time somebody says, hey, can you do this? And you say, yeah, I can do that. But let me think, how am I going to do it?
Yeah. That's interesting that you mentioned that we're always so rushed. We're trying to do things so fast. And I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to do things efficiently, of course. And I'm sure you wouldn't think that either, but we're just in such a go rush, hurry, do it fast versus do it properly.
Yeah. And I'd probably even add to that, Kerri, that, there is this idea that like properly, but what if we don't know, but we give ourselves room to be present enough to figure it out?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is if we go back to like the analogy of children being able, to look at something and then figure out how best to do it, right? Whether it's getting candy from up in the pantry or stacking things up. If we take the idea of children figuring out and taking the time to create sort of a step ladder to get candy out of a pantry, right? That takes longer than just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid doesn't necessarily know, is it proper? Is it right? They just know that's the only way I can do it.
Yeah.
And over time, I think as we grow up, we find better, I use that word very loosely, better ways to do things, but it's usually at the expense of us because we feel the need to produce or to go fast. We have to rush versus take all the time you need, and it'll be interesting, as your children grow up and seeing them, even for example, like write their letters, like how hard are you holding on to the pencil? How hard are you focusing on writing that? So I always tell my children, I say, remember your body. I just put my hands on their shoulders and I ask them, remember your body, because your body is a part of that activity.
Yeah.
And I think we dissociate ourselves and it's like mind, develop the mind, math, writing, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, here's a little PE. And yet our bodies are with us all the time. And whether or not we acknowledge that or not, our bodies are responding to things. Mm-hmm. So if we are feeling stress, our body feels it. If we're feeling, anxiety, our body feels it.
Right.
And I think in this day and age, a lot of people spend a lot of their time in that sort of stress mode, which we also call, the fight or flight. You can also call it the sympathetic nervous system. And I think that we don't always finish that cycle because there's a natural cycle that you take, right, from that sympathetic to the parasympathetic, which is your body's relaxation response. That's the rest and digest. And I feel like, and this is just my opinion, I feel like people don't visit the rest and digest as often as they should because they're always in that fight or flight state. Yeah. They're constantly responding to the triggers of life and their body is responding. It has the same sort of adrenaline, like their body's chemical responses to those stressors are the same as if they're running from a tiger. It's like your body, stress is stress, right? And so even if, for example, you're on a date, that could be exciting. You might still have like your palms might get clammy. Maybe you get sweaty, right? You might have still these same responses that also happen when you're nervous or when you're anxious or when your boss tells you and he needs a last minute meeting and you're like, what's this about? Right. So again, the body responds very similarly. And yet we don't always let it finish by bringing us back to that state of relaxation, that rest and digest.
I'm going to go ahead and say that there's got to be a reason. Like, I think more people need to hear that more often about letting that cycle complete. Because I've lost count, honestly, with so many different practitioners and all these different modalities that I've been interviewing over the last few months. So many have mentioned the sympathetic and into the parasympathetic nervous system. So I think it's a sign that you're mentioning that as well, that people who are listening to this need to hear that and need to be aware of allowing that cycle to complete. And I think I'm one of them. I'm sure I'm one of them.
Yeah. I mean, we all can have practice, but because I try to make this work very tangible for people. So I'll tell people, if you think of things as like muscles, your body probably has more experience working out the muscle of the sympathetic, the stress response, versus probably less experience working out that parasympathetic nervous system. So, but however, that being said, if we do treat it like a muscle, that means that you can learn how to.
Right.
If you repeatedly practice this idea of learning to rest and give yourself a space where you can calm down. However, I think a lot of people fight and resist that because of this need to be productive, this
Yep.
need to not be lazy, it's like, we kind of save rest for special long 3-day weekends, right? Or vacation. And to me, rest looks like I just had dinner with my family. I've got to go back to work in the next, for the next hour, but I have about 10 minutes, and you look at your dirty kitchen, but you opt to lie down. And you say, I'll deal with the dirty kitchen later. Or you know what I'm saying? Like you make a choice to say, that's okay. Because it would be more helpful to my body, to my mind and body, really, if I were to lay down, enjoy my kids running around me crazy, but I'm resting physically. I'm not going to sleep. I'm not scrolling through my phone. I'm just resting my body and being able to get an opportunity to relax. And then you get up and you're like,
I'm not tired. I'm just resting my eyes.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Go ahead. I know that's not what you're saying. That's just what popped into my head.
When you have the younger kids, it's especially like that, right? Yeah. But I think for a lot of us, there's a guilt around rest.
Yeah.
There's sort of like this need to be on all the time. And I think there's a lack of awareness about how to interact with things like social media and technology that becomes quote unquote rest. People think they're resting.
Yeah.
But really they're not.
Right.
Really they're being triggered. Maybe they're getting anxiety from looking at things that are not serving them, that are not. So, it's kind of like if you continuously ask yourself the following question and you say, am I getting something positive from this? And as soon as the answer is no, putting it away. And not necessarily when it comes to work, because you don't always have those options, but definitely when it comes to things like scrolling through, looking at the Netflix that you're trying to decide what to watch or what have you, like, is it bringing me joy and do I feel happy about it? And if not, okay, let me take a break.
There are a couple things that I'm having like flashbacks to different times of stress in my life as you're talking. And when you mentioned with the handwriting, I'm not that way anymore. And in fact, I've probably flipped to the complete opposite side where sometimes now like my writing is almost like chicken scratch. Like I can't even read what I'm writing because I'm writing so fast. But when I was in school, and I think I didn't really realize how much stress I had placed on myself. And when I realized I could see that in my writing, it was so like, it's so different. Yeah. Looking back at notes that I had from school versus the way I write now, my writing was like so perfect. And I was writing so hard on the paper that you could feel it through the other side and the paper would start to curl up on the edge. So like I look back, I'm like, I think I was under a lot of stress when I was.
Yeah.
And then I also remember like I had some bath bombs or like different things like that. And I remember hanging on to them for the longest time and not using them because I was telling myself, well, I'm not stressed out enough to deserve that. You know, if that makes sense. Like it was, I don't know if other people think that way in their minds, but like I felt like I didn't deserve it. Not because I wasn't stressed, but I'm like, I'm not stressed out enough. Like there are other people in this world that are more stressed out than me. I don't deserve that, that rest in that way.
That's the same thing as the person who has the gift massage, like the gift, what is it? The gift certificate for a massage that they never get, right? It's like, oh, I'll save it. Or,
were you spying on me these last couple of years?
I have one too from a student.
I started using them, but it took a couple years.
It's funny though, because I do think that speaks to something. I think a lot of people, there's like this sort of imaginary scale that is at what point have we earned it, like you said, or do we need it? Right. And so, for me, one of the things I think about is meeting myself in the moment and what do I need in the moment? And I still remember when I was moving from New York City to Atlanta, we had a brief stay with my folks in Virginia and I was traveling back and forth to New York still. And at this point I had my second daughter and I was breast pumping and et cetera, et cetera. My mom said, well, what do you have to do before you go? And I said, well, I got to pack. I have to breast pump. I need to go to the gym. And I was going to bake some little goodies for my student. Like I had this long list. My mom's like, you've got 4 hours. Like you're definitely not going to be able to go to the gym. You're not like this stuff. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa. The gym's the first thing I'm going to do. I was like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it's always about what is going to help me in the long run.
Yeah.
So I think about it as how will I be able to show up at my best and be the most sustainable versus how can I produce a lot in a little bit of time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, it's like, I like to think of it as a reserve. So if I rest for just a little bit of time, let's say 10 or 15 minutes a day, will that allow me to go longer at more energy throughout the day? And in my case, the answer is yes. Versus if I go, and then I'm exhausted, utterly exhausted at night, and I want to check out because then I can't be present with anybody.
Right.
You know, nobody else, let alone myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think about presence and the lack of presence that people have. And I don't blame people.
Right.
I think that we are overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
We have so much that we're paying attention to and that we're being like the information that we're taking in and that we're trying to put out. And I just think there's a lot of that. But what if you just waited in line at the grocery store without looking at your phone?
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Or what if you just took a walk, but you didn't listen to a podcast?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like, what would you become aware of? Would you notice, oh, I'm kind of favoring this side? Would you be able to anticipate, oh, you know what? I'm feeling extra exhausted. I feel like I'm pushing my body to the brink. I feel like I need to, you know what? I was going to wait to, you know, take that one extra day off at the end of the month, but I think I need it now.
Yeah.
Like, what if your body was talking to you and you were listening so that you could anticipate needs that haven't even, you know, arisen, that they haven't even come up. And so that's what I always tell students is that I'm getting you hopefully to a point where your body is not screaming in pain, but it's that you're like, you hear little whispers and you're like, oh, I could ignore it, but actually this would be really good for me.
Yeah.
I need to, you know, spend time with my family, or I need to spend some time by myself and I need to lie down or get a massage or go for a walk and get some exercise. I need to eat a little bit healthier because I can just tell, you know, because your body is talking to you all the time, whether or not you listen to it.
Yeah.
You know,
I have had some personal training clients in the past where the way they would tell me that something didn't agree with them, like if they knew that they had knee problems, they'd be like, oh, my knee's talking to me right now. Or, you know, with this exercise, my knee's talking to me. But I think that's a really good point. Like if we all, like, even if you don't know or aren't aware of any knee pain, listen, because your knees are still going to talk to you if something's up. It's just not going to talk to you in the same way it's going to with someone who already has a chronic level of pain in their knee.
Yeah. And I often tell students at some point, if we're lucky enough to live until, you know, we're seniors, all of us are going to have a moment, whether it's just aging or there's an accident or there's an injury or what have you. All of us at some point in our life are going to have to think about how we move. It's just inevitable. Mm-hmm. So what if you were aware and thought about it before you needed it?
Right.
What if you had all these tools in your toolbox, so to speak, that you could be like, oh, I've already thought about a million different ways to get up off the floor or to get up out of the bed or to get up from a chair, you know? And in my experience, the more that people practice this work, the more able they are to see different options, that they have choices about how they move. Oh, actually, I don't even have to move at all because I could pull this tablecloth and look, the olives came to me. You know, it's like all of a sudden you have all these different kinds of like creative ways of you know, being able to do things easier where it's not at your expense.
Right. I want to focus a little bit. I found it interesting when you mentioned habits connected to thoughts. Like we might habitually think a certain way or react a certain way. And I know for me, and I think for probably a lot of people, when we think habits, we're thinking those physical actions that we're taking, things that we do throughout the day that are habits, but we don't necessarily think about our thinking habits, the way we react or respond in certain situations. Can you talk a little bit about that and how to become aware of that and make those changes?
So this one's really personal because for me, growing up as a female, there was definitely like a lot of negative self-talk, personally speaking, from childhood into my teens and young adulthood. And that's a habitual way of thinking, that I'm either not a certain look or certain way or certain kind of person or good enough and the standards were imaginary, right? It's not that my parents put that on me. It's not that my school, right? It's like, it's this like imaginary scale I've created, which I will never be able to achieve, right? I think that oftentimes we don't think about the person who we're talking to and listening to the most, which is ourselves, right? So at the end of the day, I'm with my own thoughts. And what if my thoughts were encouraging? What if my thoughts were positive? Like, hey, today was rough. Tomorrow's going to be better. What if they weren't always criticizing, but they were problem solving? Oh, I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. Well, you know what? Tomorrow, let's wake up a little earlier and we'll do 2 miles walking tomorrow instead of just the one, whatever, right? Like, what if the thoughts were productive, helpful, empathetic? And so for me, there was a shift where I decided I was going to talk to myself like my best friend. It was a very conscious decision on my part. And it was because I realized the real story is, I had a student on the Upper East Side and I had met her in a Parkinson's class and she started seeing me individually for private lessons. Now, this woman was amazing. She was living on her own. She was older. She was doing awesome. The woman had Parkinson's and was by herself. Like, kudos to this woman. Yeah. And I showed her a picture of her amazing posture. We were working on her standing and sitting and balance, etc. And I said, hey, look at this picture of your beautiful back. Your spine looks gorgeous. You're great and upright. And the thing she looked at was her skin. And she was like, look at all that discoloration. And that's what she saw when she looked at that picture. And for me, like, I didn't look at that.
Right.
And I realized, when I'm looking at my friends, like I'm looking at you and I'm like, hey, you have beautiful blonde hair. Like, I love the cute bob. I could never pull that off. Like, that's so cute. So we look at like positives, right? So for me, there was a shift because I said, I don't want to wait until I'm in my late 80s, 90s, still talking to myself. Like I don't want to wait. Yeah. I keep thinking it'll happen, that it'll change, but I actually have to change it.
Right.
It's not going to all of a sudden change into something else. Yeah. I have to do that. And so for me, it was a conscious choice. I'm not going to talk to myself like that. I'm going to talk to myself as though I'm my best friend. And my best friend would say, whoa, you didn't get a lot of sleep last night. You got some big bags. Let's put some extra concealer on there. She would be always positive. She'd say, hey, you ate a whole roll of Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. Yeah, those cookies are awesome. And now you got to go running a little extra harder today. She would always be positive and uplifting.
Yeah.
And for me, I found a lot of my anxiety went away. A lot of my negative self-talk went away. So my go-to is no longer, my habitual way of thinking is no longer negative. I tend to the positive, which then by default affects my relationships, not just with myself, but with others.
Right.
How do I speak? How do I speak to my children? How do I speak to my husband or my students or my family and friends? And so that's been a huge game changer. But I think we have to first recognize, how are we speaking to ourselves inside our head? And it could be as simple as, I really should have stopped at the grocery store. And I always tell people shit on shoulds because, it just suggests guilt and blame. So instead it could be, it would have been nice to go to the grocery store today. Right? Patati patata. I didn't go. Okay. But it would have been nice versus I should have.
Yeah.
I thought, there's like a failure,
right?
Sort of, it's suggested in that thought versus, I could have gone to the grocery store today. I can do that tomorrow. So even thinking about those smaller thoughts and then quickly changing them. So what I suggest to students is when you have the thought and you recognize that it's not a positive or helpful one, immediately change it to a different one. So I'm so fat. You might be trying on a dress before work or pants or what have you, and you think I'm so fat. Instead, you'd replace it and then you'd say, these pants are a little tight. I'm going to get a new pair of pants, or I'm going to get a new whatever. So it is what it is. It's an observation, but it removes the judgment, the good, the bad, the assessment of some evaluation, right? And then you just come up with something else. So you have to replace the thought. You can't just ignore it. You can't just identify that it's been bad, but you have to then immediately replace it until one day you find yourself looking in the mirror and you're like, this blouse is a little tight. Okay. I didn't even have another thought. It's a little tight. Okay.
Yeah. I think we've kind of almost normalized the negative self-talk. Like that's how we're supposed to think. That's how we're supposed to act. Like we talk with each other and we talk with our friends and we self-deprecate all the time and talk bad about ourselves to each other because it's a talking point. It's something that we end up almost connecting on. And then it makes it normal. Like, oh, I'm supposed to continue thinking of myself that way because that's how we talk about ourselves with each other. If that, does that make sense? Like, how we do that. And then almost like waiting, like you were saying, like one day it'll change. Like we're waiting for someone else to come in and flip our thoughts for us. Like some magical person is going to show up and tell us how amazing we are, and we're instantly going to believe them, and it's going to change our thought process, and everything's going to be great from there. Like, no, like you said, like we have to consciously do the work, catch ourselves, and change our thoughts. We can't wait for someone else, and enough normalizing talking badly about ourselves and making it a conversation piece.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that that's sort of, it's a habit in our relationships with other people and in the way that we connect. So sometimes if I hear somebody say something like that, for example, a student might say something like, oh, da, da, da. And I'll say, don't talk about my student like that.
Oh,
I try to like remove, you know what I mean? So as a trainer, you could say like, don't talk about my client that way.
Right.
Like praise my client. So in my case, I've been working on the way that I speak since my daughter was born, my first daughter who just turned 7. And I still have to correct myself. So the students who are in my classes or who've been studying with me for a long time, they hear me say, wait a minute, I don't mean that. And then I'll take it back. So I might misspeak out of habit, and I'll consciously take it back and then I'll replace it. So even today I told a student, well, what you really should do. And then I said, actually, no, what you could do if you would like to take the advice of your teacher is ... Right.
Sure.
And so I think by setting an example that's how you do the work. I don't always avoid habitual ways of speaking. That's why I constantly have to work at it. But do I make as many mistakes? No. Because I'm always practicing it.
Right.
Right. And then it also, I think it raises the bar for your friends. When you do that, other people are less likely. So a funny story about my daughters, my oldest was probably 4. And I was checking out the grocery store, and I'm not a coupon person usually, but this was a good coupon. It was like $2.50 off something, who knows what. And I was like, oh, I've got a coupon. So I'm digging through, and then I apologized out of habit to the woman behind me, because all of a sudden now I realized like I'm done checking out and now I'm digging for the coupon. And I said to her, oh, I'm sorry. And then I kept digging, and my daughter, who's 4 at the time, said, Mama, why are you apologizing? I said, you're right. I don't need to apologize. I did nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't do anything wrong. So I acknowledged my daughter, and the woman behind me was like, oh, it's okay if you apologize. That's okay. I said, yeah, but I actually didn't do anything wrong. So my daughter is actually right, And I think, again, we set the example for our children based on the way we speak and the way we show up.
Right.
Right. And so apologizing unnecessarily, or how many times has somebody run into you and you say, oh, I'm sorry, but it was their fault, instead of saying, excuse me, or be careful, right? There's other ways versus sorry, which is apologetic and not necessary.
Yeah.
I think that when we try to change a habit of thought, that's harder than trying to change the way that we speak, because the habits in our head, no one can hear it. So there's no sort of accountability, right? So it requires more conscious choices, I think, on the person's part to say, I want to change that thought about my head. Like, I don't want to have these thoughts. And I think often when it comes to our body, we look outside of ourselves for the solution. We say, oh, I want to go to a doctor. Oh, I want to go to this. I want to, to make me feel better, to help me, which is great. But oftentimes I see there being a lack of awareness about what is really actually going on with the person. Mm-hmm. So even when they go to the specialist or the doctor or the whomever, it's like they can't even talk about their own body. They look to the professionals to tell them about them.
Yep.
And really, it's our responsibility to go to somebody and say, this is what's going on. How best can you help me? So the more we know ourselves, the more we're in tune and embodied with what's happening with us, the more likely we are to get the help that we need whenever, we need to see a podiatrist, or we need to see a chiropractor, or whatever you go, whoever you see for whatever problems you have.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that, because I had a similar thought the other day. Like, I don't think I have anything that I need to be concerned about, but every once in a while I would feel something inside, like my leg or something. And for some reason I had this random thought. I'm like, what if I had to go to the doctor about that? And I had to describe what was going on. And I just feel like if there's something that's not obvious, maybe but something's not right, you got to be your own advocate, speak up for yourself and be like, okay, well, maybe it's not presenting this major disastrous problem right now, but your body's not supposed to be doing that. So let's figure out what's going on, and don't back down. Like, if something's not right, do what you can to figure out what's going on, and do your research, find the people who can help you if you need that outside help, but don't back down when your body's talking to you.
Well, it's the example I always talk to intro classes. I'll always mention, how many times have you gone, and this is maybe more appropriate for pre-pandemic when life was more normal,
sure,
but how many times did you go someplace, drop a friend off or something, and you knew you had to pee, but you're like, well, I'll just wait till I get home, right? You're like 5 minutes from home, you have to go, but you're like, I don't want to inconvenience. It's late. I don't want to. It's like your body is saying you have to go to the bathroom, but you decide to hold it. Or how many times has a woman worn high heels and known that like they're really uncomfortable, but I'm going to keep on, or, whatever the case may be. And that's, again, to me, the body has a certain threshold at which it starts to be less forgiving.
Right.
And then it says, no, you've really upset me, and I'm going to make sure that you listen. So when people come to me and they throw out their backs, I'm like, yeah, that put me out for a few days. I know, whoa, that person probably doesn't listen to their body a lot.
Right.
Their body got so upset that then it really went and it revolted. It was like, no, enough is enough.
Yeah.
So if you can get more in tune and more in touch, you can anticipate what your body wants. You can anticipate what your body needs. And the body is amazing. It will reward you. So that those times you do have to take a huge flight across, the ocean, all of a sudden you're in this uncomfortable seat, but your body's like, you know what? Most of the time you're listening to me and taking care of me. I got you. I'm not going to let you get off this plane in total, utter chaos. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'll be a little stiff, a little sore, but I'm not going to, ruin your entire trip to Paris. So I feel like the more, it's almost like you've accumulated that reserve of energy, that respect for the body, that then your body rewards you and you continue to live more comfortably, right? Mm-hmm. I think people expect that at a certain age, you have to be in pain,
right?
That you have, it's like, oh, I have this kind of a desk job, so I have to have this, or, oh, I have kids, or, oh, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm whatever, so I have to have this. No, you don't. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have that.
I always reject that when people use age as an excuse for something. I'm like, nope, don't you dare even say that. Not accepted.
Yeah, it's a default and I understand everyone says it, right? Like you said, we sort of continue it. It's acceptable, but it's limiting.
Yeah.
It limits you to the fact that, oh, I can actually age and feel really comfortable. Most Alexander teachers work until they're in their 80s, 90s. I feel like teachers have been, they teach a long time and they look beautifully upright. Maybe they've had a hip replacement. Maybe they've had a shoulder thing, but generally speaking, they have a thoughtfulness and a regard and respect for their bodies that I think is lacking in most other individuals. I always tease that if you go to an Alexander Technique conference and there's like a big ceremony where everyone is asked to sit down in an auditorium, there'll be that half a second pause where everyone thinks about how they're going to sit. And it's really graceful to witness, because I've been to other conferences with other individuals and they just rush to their seat. It's like, oh, I'm being asked to sit, so I have to sit. Whereas Alexander teachers always take that extra pause to be like, oh, I'm going to do that in the most easy way possible.
Yeah. Well, I think another point that it kind of feels like we're getting towards is just that acknowledgement too. Like, yeah, maybe certain things do tend to happen when you reach a certain age, but accepting that you don't have to accept that. Like, you can change your habits. You still can change your thoughts. You can make things better. Like maybe not everything, but you know, if you're aware of what's going on with you, you have choices, like you were saying. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Well, and I think about, there was a lovely woman who I used to teach in Hoboken, and she was absolutely lovely, an older woman, maybe in her late 60s, early 70s, and her husband would dance, and she would go into the city, into Manhattan, and they would dance every weekend. They'd go to competitions to dance. They were all over. I mean, a wonderful community of dancers, right? And one time she was complaining about her knee. And she said, well, when I go up and down the subway stairs, that's when it gives me the most trouble, right? Not when I'm dancing, but up and down the stairway. And so we had looked at some stairs and stuff. And I said to her, well, is it possible that you could go slower? And she said, well, that would make me look old. And I was like, well, but you are older. And what's wrong with going up the subway stairs a little bit slower so that you can go to that place where you guys dance and where you join your community to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Again, it's like we kind of try to continue to be in our 20s, even when we're not.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you can't do things like you used to, but, you know, for my students, like, oh, I can't play 4 hours of tennis like I used to. Well, yeah, that's probably true. Mm-hmm. You probably shouldn't play for, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't usually use the word should, but maybe it's not a great idea. And if you do it, know that you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. So that you at least have that awareness of, I'm choosing this and I know there's a consequence and I'm ready for it, versus, oh, I can't believe it. I tore something. I, sprained something.
Right.
It's like, so there are limitations when you age, no doubt, but it's again, how can you be respectful of your body? How can you acknowledge the shifts and changes? Maybe you're a little heavier, maybe you're a little lighter, less flexible, more flexible, and when you know what's going on with yourself, you can identify how those things have shifted. Oh, yeah. I no longer can sit, crisscross applesauce like I used to for an hour. I used to be able to, but now I can't. I can only go for like 30 minutes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Again, no judgment about that, but an awareness so that then if you find yourself having a picnic with your family and you see it's been 45 minutes, I should probably get up actually.
Yeah.
This would be helpful for me. Right. Then you make that adjustment and you carry on. Right. But when you ignore those things, when you get so engrossed that you forget about this lovely body that's that's coming with you in all of these activities, you're neglecting a huge part of what makes you you.
Yeah.
And so I often will tell people, it's like if you have a car that you're driving across the country, back and forth, but you never want to get your oil changed. Mm-hmm. It's like, could you do it? Yeah, probably, but you're going to ruin your car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you don't really see the effects immediately. Right? So the idea is that if you can change your oil when you're supposed to, maintaining it, you're going to get the longevity of your car, right, is more likely because you've been maintaining it better, right? You've been taking better care of your car. So I think oftentimes if we don't have a very overt problem with ourselves, we tend to put it on a back burner or ignore it or place it on the side because we have other pressing things to do.
Mm-hmm. This leads me to kind of the last little area I want to touch on about how all of this awareness of your body, of your habits, of your thoughts leads to better self-confidence and the ability to use your voice, speak up for yourself, and just feel better about yourself in general. I know that's not really a question, but can you talk about how all that ties into the confidence factor?
Yeah, so there's actually there's a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. Have you ever heard her TED Talk?
I have not, but the name kind of sounds familiar, so I may have heard about it.
Yeah, so she has one of the top 10 TED Talks, I believe, or at least last time I checked. And she has a book out, I believe it's called Presence. And she speaks to this indirectly. She doesn't talk about Alexander technique, but she talks about body language and the way that it not only affects how other people view us, but how we view ourselves. So she has that whole, power pose where if you open your hands for 10, whatever it is, 2 minutes or 10 minutes, however long, you'll feel more confident. And she did studies about this for people going into interviews or auditions or what have you. And she found that the people who did this sort of power pose experienced, higher levels of confidence, from not only themselves, but from the others that, we're interviewing them, etc. Body language, the way that we hold ourselves or carry ourselves, show up in the world, it affects how we feel. Right. And so oftentimes, I would suggest to students, where do you end up when you learn that something horrible has happened? There's been a car accident, or, somebody has died, or there's a breakup. You usually want to slump down. You want to compress, in your torso. You want to sort of protect your heart, your lungs sort of collapse. People tend to go into more of a fetal position, right?
Yeah.
Like a rounded position. That's not necessarily going to make you feel really good. But in that moment, emotionally, that feels safe and secure. And at some point you want to remember, oh, I want to come out of that. Right? Because right now I'm not feeling that way anymore. So I want my body to reflect that. And I don't think oftentimes people are aware that they've stayed in a certain position until all of a sudden, maybe they have a weekend out and they're lying on a, in a park or something, right? I feel like people tend to sit in front of their computers, have these experiences, and it's a lot of tightening and pulling us in. And what we do in Alexander Technique is a lot of lengthening and widening. So we talk about lengthening the body and widening the body. So opening us up. And our muscles, just like, for personal training, our muscles have resting lengths, right? So if we work out muscles, they're working in pairs. Certain muscles will contract, other muscles will elongate. And then they have these sort of where they rest. When I'm in a resting state, those muscles are tighter on the top, longer on the bottom, because I've exercised them to be that way. And what I tell people is that if you're not aware of how you're using your body when you're just sitting at the computer, which you might think is not an activity, because you're like, well, I'm just sitting and I'm at my computer, so it's not really an active exercise. No, you're still holding yourself upright, right? You're holding yourself up in gravity. And you will develop resting lengths of your muscles. If your arms are always curling towards your keyboard and your neck is always towards the computer, those muscles are going to shorten and elongate in whatever position you spend those 6 to 8 hours at your desk if you're not mindful. So now when you try to say, like, why can't I keep myself upright? It's because all of a sudden you're trying to change your muscles, in a hot minute. No, you spent the last couple hours in a different position.
Right.
And that will affect how you feel. If you're compressing, that doesn't necessarily lend itself to more confidence, because you're pulling in on yourself versus opening up, lengthening, and widening. To me, confidence is one of the side effects of studying the Alexander Technique. You get confidence because your body has changed, right? You get better posture because you're more aware of what you're doing. But I always tell people, like, hopefully that's not the sole goal. It's like, I need to be like that. It's just, oh, I'm aware of what I'm doing. Oh, I notice patterns that I don't need to be, patterns of holding and tightening that I don't need to be doing, gripping that I don't need to be doing. And when you pay attention to that stuff, all the other good things come along. It's like, oh, I find myself less anxious. Oh, I find myself more confident. Our bodies are built like that. Our bodies know what to do to heal, to feel good, to speak up for ourselves. It is those patterns of repetitively either being told by outside people or by telling ourselves to be a certain way. And then we imprint that on us. And then that's where we act from. But the more you exercise doing things differently, that's your path to change. And then you can choose, how do I want to show up in this moment? Right? How do I want to be in this moment with this person? Somebody is telling me crazy news. Do I want to be compressed, or could I stay up in my spine to hear that news? They're telling me something exciting. Do I want to scrunch my neck and pull my, head forward, or do I want to keep my head on top of my spine and my arms open instead to be excited about something? Choose a way to be present in yourself, and that indirectly is going to affect how you feel. Thus, I think, leading to more confidence. This to me is like such a rich topic, Kerri. That's why I'm like pausing.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
And I wish I could show you, like, I have these before and after pictures of myself before I studied the Alexander Technique and after. And you can see like me before. And I was like really, like, I had no neck. I was really hunched and I was sad. I was like really sad. and very anxious and very stressed. I had trauma growing up. So I was molested when I was 8.
Oh, wow.
And my brother died when I was 15.
Oh.
So I had these 2 events that really like imprinted me and my body. And I was really detached from it. It's like I just kind of showed up and did the best I could, but I wasn't really comfortable in my skin.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a long time. And when I like blossomed into it, it was like dramatic. And it's possible to do that, but nobody can do that for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you have to decide that you're worth it, that you're important, and that you're willing to work for it. And I think the work actually comes from letting go, not putting on. So what I mean by that is I feel like people think for confidence, you have to pull the shoulders back. You have to lift up that. You have to do something. But you don't have to do anything. You have to stop pulling down. You have to stop compressing, stop holding your breath, stop pulling your arms into your torso, and start realizing, oh, I don't have to do that. Which again, if you look at little kids are definitely open and out. Yeah. They're so open. They're like, unless they get yelled at and then they like come in. But as soon as you say ice cream, they're like back out again. You know what I mean? They're like, ice cream. Do I get a cone? It's like, they go back and forth so easily. And I just feel as we age, we have more practice coming in than returning back to the out. So it's sort of like if you want to use a dog or something as an example, it's like the dog that gets really stressed when it hears the doorbell and it's like, and the hair stands on end. Who's there? Who's there? Who's there? What's going on? Right. And then they're like, oh, it's the neighbor who brings me treats, and it relaxes. Mm-hmm. It's like, we don't know how to relax. So we stay in this constant state of, fight or flight where we're pulling everything in. And that doesn't I don't think it lends itself to us feeling very confident, Right.
I feel like we have to have like a part 2 conversation where we go more into the trauma and anxiety. If you're open to that, I'd like to down the road at some point.
No, I'm very open with, I tell everybody from the moment it's been happening, I've been saying something. So I'm very open. Yeah. And it's the stuff that actually interests me a lot because I think the body holds trauma.
Yeah. I keep hearing that phrase a lot. And I think there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score that I think I need to look into that.
Yeah. I haven't read it, but it's on my bookshelf. A student gave it to me. The Body Keeps the Score. But yeah, it's funny because I can touch somebody and I can feel it. I'm sure Reiki. We don't know what.
Right.
But it's like you can feel it. And people deserve to feel good.
Yeah.
Like we deserve to feel good and we don't want to have to wait. So I always tell people that I'm always happy being where I'm at. So if I died right now, like if a lightning struck me, like I'd be content. Like I kissed my kids goodnight. I kissed my husband before I came down to do this interview. Like, so life is good. Life feels good. And I feel like people kind of wait, like you said, like wait, feel good. Yeah. Like don't wait. You can have it right now, but you have to work for it.
Right.
You have to make a decision that in the middle of a conversation, I might say to you, hold on just a second. Let me go get a sweatshirt because it's cold down here. Right. But instead, people might stay freezing because they don't want to be rude because they perceive it as rude. I perceive it as you're taking care of yourself.
Right. I know I'm definitely at a point where I'm like, I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to be nice about it, but I'm going to do what I need to do. And that's just how it is.
As a mom, you have to, but there's a demand, right? Because you wouldn't be able to show up properly for your kids if you didn't do that. Mm-hmm. Right?
And that's what I told my youngest when he wasn't sleeping through the night. I'm like, kid, if you let mommy sleep, I can be a better mommy to you.
Did he understand that?
No.
Your 2-year-old. Yeah, they totally, yeah. But they're so present. They're such good examples. They're such good examples. They're forgiving. They're loving. They don't naturally think negative. Like our brains have a bias towards negativity, but kids really don't know about that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I see that definitely with my kids big time.
Yeah. Cause they can go from crying to laughing very quickly.
Yep.
Whereas like me, it takes a minute, it's like, a second, let me just sulk a little bit longer before I come back out.
Right.
You
Like,
know?
I'm not ready to laugh yet. Yeah, that was a funny joke, but I'm not laughing yet. I'm still mad at you. Like,
Yeah, yeah. But they're so fast. They're so fast we have a lot to learn from them.
yeah.
Yeah, my brain's a little tired because my kids haven't been sleeping either.
Oh,
So
no.
hopefully there's something in here for you.
I hear there's a lot going on energetically out in the world right now. So, like, spikes and whatnot and new moon and all that jazz. So there could be something going on. So
So during this pandemic, I've been with my kids, right, every single day for over a year because my oldest did virtual all year. And I had the first week off because we enrolled them in a theater camp, like an in-person theater camp. And like they wore masks, had like anyway. So I was super excited. And I got home from dropping them off on Monday. It was Monday. It was 8 to 4, Kerri. Juicy time.
Yeah.
Right? Can you imagine what you would do from 8 to 4 without your kids for a week, like 5 days? So excited. And you know what happened? I came home. I went running, took a shower. I sat down. I sent an email about ballet. That's it. Ballet about my kids. And then my computer kaputs.
Oh, no.
My Apple computer. And so I had to ship it off. They had to ship it because there was like a problem with the logistics, whatever. And I got it back like an hour before I picked them up. They like shipped it back to me. And it was like an hour before I picked them up on Friday.
Oh, no.
And I was like, that's just mean. That's just mean of the universe. Like all that work time, just gone. Can you imagine?
The universe was probably saying, you know what? No, you're going to rest.
I know. You know that's true.
Yep.
And I was like, fuck the universe. I want to do this stuff. Like, I like work.
I would have had the same thought. I'm like, no.
I know. But it was an interesting week. It was so interesting. It was a really interesting week because I couldn't do any work and I really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting.
This has been so fun. Thank you so much for sharing so much. And yeah, we'll definitely have to schedule a part 2.
Yeah, whenever.
Yeah. So why don't you just let everyone know where they can find you and how they can connect with you?
My website is www.centerstudio.com. So that's at as an AT for Alexander Technique, centerstudio.com. And then the same handle is for Facebook and Instagram, and that's AT Center Studio. And then I have a YouTube channel that people can find me. It's just Morgan Rysden, my last name, Rysdon. And there, if they visit my YouTube channel, they can find lots of little clips. I try to keep them very bite-sized, some different topics that I have. And there's also some guided meditations that people can also access there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Morgan.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, absolutely. Another one where we're going to have a part 2 because I really felt like it was important to spend some time digging into the physical aspect of it. But then, of course, as we were getting closer to the end, we started getting more into the emotional side of it. And I feel like that warrants more than just the 5 or 10 minutes that we spent on it. So there's going to be a part 2. I don't know when. Keep your eyes peeled for it. Again, just further evidence here with this Alexander technique of how all parts of us are connected. Something like changing your posture, changing your physical habits can affect your confidence level. It's not just emotional. Well, that's obviously a big piece of it. Your physicality, being aware, being nice to your body, taking care of yourself, and not just beating yourself into the ground. This whole, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I've got goals, so I've got to work hard. Slow down and listen to your body. Or like she said, it's going to start screaming at you. It's going to make sure that you hear it and you don't want to wait for that point. So I encourage you to check out Morgan's website, head to her YouTube, check out some of those videos, guided meditations, and definitely connect with her if you feel like this is something that could be helpful for you on your confidence journey. As always, I would like to invite you into my Facebook group, The Energy Within, if you're not already in there, where we do group Reiki, live card pulls, and I'm in there sharing motivational, inspirational messages, kind of whatever's popping into my head that I feel is relevant and important and connects to the idea of accessing, using, boosting your energy and your confidence. And of course, I would love to have you come do a Reiki session with me. I've done a little bit of updating on my website if you haven't been on it lately, with a little bit more explanation of how Reiki can help you. And of course, there's always the testimonials there for you to see. I love getting the feedback on how these Reiki sessions have been able to help women, how it's improved different areas of their life, from confidence to relationships to even business. It's good for so many things. Mainly, I want to help you get unstuck. Because if you're anything like me, you feel stuck and like you're spinning your wheels a lot. And through Reiki, we can find some answers and some clarity for you so you can start moving forward. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Share it to your social media, tag me, tag Morgan. Let us know what you liked. Let us know what stuck out to you and maybe what you have questions for regarding the emotional aspect. And we'll tackle those when we do our part 2. Thank you so much, as always, for listening, and I'll see you next time.